carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts, and over 100 in mushrooms, but over 60, over 80 in spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, all the different fruits and vegetables that we would eat as a normal part of our diet. And we were quite taken aback by that. I remember we all thought he was joking. We were looking around wildly, thinking there must be someone in on the joke. Someone must be laughing in the corner or something like that. I was looking for a TA somewhere that was just snickering in the corner or something like that. But there wasn't any. And so eventually it just sort of dawned on us that he was serious. And I remember thinking in my head, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? Even though they're packed with carcinogens. And he just sort of looked at us, and I felt like he read my mind, because he just gave us a funny look, and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. I was like, and just made a decision then. Great, not eating plants. I'm just done with that. I was also very interested in nutrition because of my athletics. I always played sports since I was a kid. I trained in MMA, then rugby. I was an All-American. I played at UW. I played for the Seattle, premiership team at the time as well. And so I was training I would finish it at UW at 3. I'd be at UW training at 3:30. I'd train until about 6:30, and then I go straight to my men's team practice at 7. I go 7 to 9:30, and then I go to the gym. So it was a very, very busy schedule. And, I was able to do it, but now I felt amazing. Now I felt amazing doing it. I never ran out of energy. I could just go.
So I was eliminated the plants at this point and gone like pretty carnivore at that point without really even knowing it. It didn't have a label, but you just stopped eating plants.
That's it. So yeah, I went to the grocery store, and I just was looking around like, well, what the hell do I eat? Because it's just all plants. There's plants in everything. It's either that's the main ingredient, like bread, pasta, or produce, or at least is included in something. And so I just was walking around in a daze going, well, what the hell do I eat? And I just came around some eggs. I was like, okay, eggs. Eggs don't come from plants. I'll get some eggs. And meat doesn't come from plants. I'll get some meat. So I wasn't doing a carnivore diet. There wasn't anything by that name, and at that time, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together at the time with what I had learned since I was a child, that humans are apex predators, top of the food chain. We've been hunters and carnivores for millions of years. Like, that's what the evidence shows, and that's what we teach grade school kids, or at least we did before the vegan propaganda started. And, coming indoctrinating everybody. But that's what I was taught as a kid, that humans are apex predators. And that's what paleoanthropologists show and archaeologists show. That's what the fossil record shows. And that's what our biology shows. And so it's really important to eat to your biological design. We, as a species, are about 300,000 years old. We are living in modern times, but our genetics are still hundreds of thousands of years old. So we haven't changed too much since then. But some adaptations more recently with the introduction of agriculture 8 to 10,000 years ago for some people, but not for everyone. And 10,000 years is not nearly long enough to become fully adapted to these plant toxins. And certainly not all the plant toxins. You can't just, there's different ones. Plants make about 1 million different defense chemicals. And so, you might, as a species of animals, you might, over hundreds of thousands of years, build up immunity to specific poisons in specific plants. You can eat that plant and survive, but you're not going to eat all the other plants. So even herbivores that exclusively eat plants, they eat a very specific diet. They eat very specific plants, and they eat other plants. They can get very sick or die even. There's a whole field of veterinary medicine, especially livestock medicine, where there's specific diseases like big head, limp neck, big tongue, crazy cow syndrome, that are all diseases, but they're not diseases. We know these are toxicities. They come from eating the wrong plant, and they don't have the defenses against those plants, and they get sick, but not sick enough to just die. Some plants will just kill them, and they tend to avoid those things. But if you're stuck in a pasture and you run out of feed, you run out of forage, that's when you start seeing animals eating other plants that they're really not designed for, and they can get very hurt or they can die. So it usually doesn't happen in the wild. There's other nutritional issues as well coming from not getting enough of what you need. So muscular dystrophy exists in cows. Not everybody knows that. I didn't know that. I learned this last year, speaking to ranchers and vets. And in fact, it's apparently, from what they're saying, it is the exact same disease. It presents the exact same way as it does in humans, but they have figured out that it actually comes from a selenium deficiency. So they call it nutritional muscular dystrophy, right? So that begs the question, has anyone looked into nutritional deficiencies, specifically selenium, for humans with muscular dystrophy? Has anyone looked at that? Because you have, well, it's genetic. Well, no, you have genetic predisposition, but generally you have an environmental trigger. And so maybe these people that have selenium deficiencies with that genetic predisposition can develop muscular dystrophy just like the cows can. Not all cows will necessarily get this. I would expect that there's a genetic component to that as well. But maybe it's just across the board, you get a selenium deficiency and you get this in cows. I'm not sure. But either way, that's part of it. And so has anybody ever asked that? I don't know if they have. There's not a lot of communication between the vet world and the human MD world. So that's something that I think really requires investigation to think about. And that's what a lot of diseases are that I've found, is a combination of toxicities and malnutrition, these so-called non-communicable chronic diseases, NCDs, which make up about 90% of the issues that doctors treat nowadays. These things didn't exist in any real number before the 20th century, and really before 60 years ago. Heart disease was the number one killer at the time, but it wasn't even heard of in the 1910s and 1920s. It wasn't until the 1930s that this really started taking off. And then obviously it's been a major problem since then. But these other chronic diseases haven't really. They've gone on the rise and been sort of slowly coming up. But then in the last 40 years, they've really come up decade after decade after decade. And people say, well, it's just screening. We're doing better at screening. No, you're having people that are having more first-time heart attacks. That has nothing to do with screening. People are getting heart attacks. It's just that they're surviving more, And so, and the mortality rate around the world is actually going up for heart attacks, heart disease, stroke.
Well, we're eating less red meat than ever, by the way. So that should immediately be just the alarm bell in people's heads. Like, this doesn't add up to what we're being told on TV, people. Because red meat intake is plummeting. If you ask any random person out in public, do you think red meat is good for you? 9 out of 10 say no, it gives you a heart attack. Yeah. So people aren't eating it. They have been given permission by the overlords to just stuff their faces with, bread and garbage.
Yeah. And they tell you that obesity is genetic. It doesn't matter. You just have to take Ozempic and just take these drugs and all that sort of stuff. Diet and exercise doesn't matter. So eat all the candy and cake. It doesn't matter. But red meat's bad for you. Like, what? What's wrong with you? So
only the things that make you more hungry when you eat them, peculiar.
Yeah, they're saying that everything is genetic except for red meat. Red meat causes death, and everything else is genetic. It's just foolish. And and that's the thing. You're right. We've actually significantly reduced the amount of red meat that we've been eating in the last 40 years, especially since the 1970s. We've reduced our red meat consumption by over 1/3. Increased fruits and vegetables by 30 and 40% respectively. Increased grains, significantly. Increased amounts of sugars and high fructose corn syrup that we eat by over 3-fold, and increase the so-called heart healthy polyunsaturated vegetable oil, seed oils by over 3-fold as well. And what happened since then? Well, the rates of heart disease went up. Cancer rates went up. Diabetes rates went up. Stroke rates went up. Autoimmunity went up. Alzheimer's went up. Depression went up. Autism went up. Psychiatric conditions went up. ADHD, bipolar disorder, major depression, anxiety, all these other sort of issues, schizophrenia. These things are on the rise. Why would they be on the rise? Right. Well, we just didn't notice it before. Really? You didn't notice someone with Crohn's disease before having 30 bloody bowel motions a day? Really? You just didn't catch that? That's ridiculous. We've been describing these diseases for quite some time, and people know what they were. But the problem is that people just think that, well, they take the easy way out. They just say that, well, we're seeing it on the rise now, but it was probably already always there. We just didn't see it. Like, why would you assume that? People have actually taken extremely detailed and careful records and medical records. We have medical records going back to Galen and Hippocrates, right? So why would we think that we only figured out how to use a pencil last week, right? So, we had people, people just don't know medical history. I mean, you read these things. Read William Osler. He was one of the great medical teachers of all time. And he wrote several books and textbooks. He was the first professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. And he has a whole textbook and looking at all these diseases. This is how you treat them. This is what you see. This is what you do. Nothing in there was heart disease, heart attacks, anything like that. Through his entire career, he described 6 episodes that could potentially be, symptomatically would be similar to angina, but no heart attacks. He never described a single person dying from a heart attack that he saw. The first confirmed death by heart attack on autopsy in America was in 1912, and no one believed him because they said, we've never seen this. We've all done thousands of autopsies. Thousands of other doctors have done thousands of autopsies over the last 100 to 200 years. No one's ever seen this. This isn't in the literature anywhere. And people published because you did autopsies and autopsies and autopsies and autopsies and autopsies to try to see what you could find, what you can do, what you could figure out, and what you could discover that was new ways of dying, new ways of people getting sick, because you got your name on things. If you discovered something new, your name was immortalized. You have Osler's nodes, after William Osler. You have Trendelenburg gait. You have Cushing's disease. You have Colles fracture. You have Alzheimer's disease. All these sorts of things, right? These are named after the people who discovered them and first described them and first published on them. So that was how you immortalized your name. Everyone wanted to do this, right? And so this guy published on this heart attack. First in time from this, the thrombus blocking the coronary vessels, and looks like it killed the heart muscles. People were like, we think you got that wrong. We've never seen that. We've never heard of that. Doesn't make sense. And they didn't believe him for another 10 years or so into the 1920s when more of these started showing up. And so they were like, oh, okay, maybe there's a new disease on the horizon. 10 years later, it's the number 1 killer in America. Is that really just because no one was paying attention? People were paying attention. They were doing copious amounts of autopsies. They just did not see it, right? The entire century of the 1800s, there isn't a single published record in America or elsewhere, I believe, that I know of someone dying from a heart attack and being shown on autopsy. There's one obscure reference to a conference where someone presented a case report of an autopsy they found that looked like this. Well, look, it looked like there's this thrombus in the coronary vessels of the heart. Isn't that strange? We've never seen that before. No one's ever seen that before. Isn't that weird? Right. So late 1700s, they saw it, they picked it up, and nothing for another 130 years until you get to 1912. And again, then they were like, look, we've never heard of this. Right. So, they didn't think that was something. I'm sure that there were heart attacks in between it, but there weren't enough to be picked up on autopsy. There weren't enough to hit the radar that people weren't describing this weird way that people were dying. And before that either, Dr. Harvey described the circulatory system. He figured that out. No one had ever figured that out in thousands of years. He figured that out. You know how many hearts and autopsies and bodies he had to look at before he figured out what's going on? And he didn't see a single one. He didn't see a single myocardial infarction, not once. That doesn't make any sense. If they were so prevalent, if this was just the number 1 killer, because in the 1800s, we were eating more meat than we were in the early 1900s, especially, and a lot more lard. We didn't have the seed oils. We didn't have access to sugar. We didn't have all the refined grains. It was meat. People ate meat if they could get it, and they would eat plants to fill in the gaps or for preference, for taste and things like that. But people ate meat. They ate a lot of meat, and they ate a lot of fatty meat. They were never worried about that. In 1911, I think the average American ate around 16 pounds of butter a year. And now it's a fraction of that. And the heart disease rates and the heart disease deaths from heart disease is far higher.